Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. Barry and I have a great conversation today because Father's Day was last week, and we thought it'd be a great topic to talk about fathers and the importance of fathers and the effect that it has on us, whether we had a father or not.
Mm-hmm.
In my
Absolutely.
case, I was abandoned by my father from birth, so I never met my father until I turned 30. I went and knocked on his door and said, "I'd like to meet you." But that's a long story, so we won't get into that right now. But Barry grew up with a father, but we were just saying that regardless of if you had a father in your life or not, they impact you, whether their absence impacts you or whether they're in your life and the role model they are in your life. So why don't we start with you, Barry? Why don't you share a little bit about what your experience was growing up in a house with a father who was always present, at least physically.
At least physically, key qualification there. Yeah.
Exactly.
And we talked, and again, just those people who are listening, if you've been listening to our previous broadcasts, we had talked about fathers in other ways. So some of us will be what's the word looking for? Not repeating, but remembering that and then adding to it in this context. And again, because it was Father's Day recently, this isn't about denigrating fathers. It's just about talking about the father experience and how that impacts us individually. So I want to preface it with that. My upbringing, yes, I was raised with a father who basically was around until he was 95. I mean, he was passed away back in 2021. And as we hinted at, yes, he was there all the time physically, but emotionally not so much. And so for me, my experience was, and this is sort of the way I look at it from hindsight, 'cause at the time I had no idea, was that he basically was pretty much emotionally unavailable because he was so, I don't want to say shut down, but just so aloof. That's probably a better way of putting it. You know, he was doing what he's supposed to do for the family, the rules of life. You know, it's like take care of the family, and create like a safe house and get the money, sort of thing. And you know, he wasn't like a millionaire or anything like that, but he was like he'd do his job diligently to get paid to take care of the family. That was kind of the mindset he carried. And so the emotional availability was much more of my mother than my father, which meant that I didn't get a very strong emotionally available energy from a male role model growing up. And so that was one of the things I had to go through as I grew out of that stage, which you can get to later. There's one thing I was going to add to that quickly. Um, there, there's there were some things happening in my dad's life. Now I look back, that kind of made him that way. And the reality is, oftentimes, you know, we don't necessarily choose what we do in our lives. We get influenced by outside experiences, as do our parents, as do grandparents, et cetera, et cetera. So I know my father's model he learned from was very similar to his own father.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry, back to you.
I was about to say, you bring up a really good point, and I think it's also the generation, and I think the way you described your father and how he showed up back then, that's really all they thought their role was,
That
which
was
was,
normal. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, an amazing role, meaning that they, the stability, the financial, financial support, stability, it's such a, I mean, even though these days we want more from our parents, both more emotional contact,
Hmm.
having that, being a role model, demonstrating responsibility to the family,
Yes.
all of those qualities you've absorbed as a male. So, and the reason I wanted to bring this subject up, was because, honestly, um, I'm a much, much better now. But oh my God, Father's Day used to be the most painful day of my life. It was truly the day that I felt so sad, so incredibly sad, and I couldn't look at Facebook. I couldn't look at all the wonderful, oh my God, you're the best father in the world, or Father in heaven, I love you. And, it just used to just be like a stab wound in me. But now I'm totally sort of at peace with it.
Right.
Um, but what I was going to say is, I think we also moved into a culture where sometimes we didn't um, understand how important the father role was for us as children. whether male or female. Uh,
Right.
I think, as I just mentioned, for you, okay, maybe your father wasn't there in the sense that, or rather, didn't demonstrate outwardly emotion, but he showed you his commitment to you and your family, and he showed you honor. He showed you so many things that were unspoken, maybe, and responsibility, and how he showed up in the world, and safety. I mean,
Right.
all of these things, children that grow up in a household with a father, whether they were sort of, not as emotionally present as they'd like, they benefit far greater. I mean, statistics show that the well-being of a child, their confidence, their self-esteem, just there's so many things that children that grow up in a two-parent family, and again, I know that we have a lot of mix. We're saying fathers right now, so
Yeah. There's
because it's Father's Day. But
right.
even in a family with a two-parent family where the father might not, it might be two mothers. It's that's a whole other show, that how two-parent families are more beneficial for a child. But even them, I mean, I have gay friends that have wonderful men that are those role models in for their children. They're particularly a couple I'm thinking of now. They have two children, but the men, their male friends are involved, so there is a male role model there. And I just think that's what I'm pointing to, is it's important to have a consistent male role model in a child's life, as well as, a mother's role, obviously, which we'll talk about on Mother's Day.
Well, yes, indeed. But I want to add a couple of pieces just to nuance that a little bit, because yes, as you said, generally speaking, a two-parent family is generally more stable, and definitely the child's expression and growth can be the healthiest way of doing things. And at the same time, there are also caveats on that. And why I was talking about my father's emotional expression, because I've done enough work and I know what's going on in the journey, is yes, absolutely the stability, the security, the safety that we had at home, which at times was threatened, by the way. It wasn't perfect all the way through.
Mm.
There was also the sense that I still missed something from him because I never felt that close to him. And that was one of the things I felt in my own journey as part of a regret I had, is that even though I had my father present, I never felt that close to him. Like he wasn't always open to us or available to me and my brother. And that's something I have to do the work on myself, because that's something I was very clear I wanted to fix in my own journey with other men and other women in my life, to have that closeness availability. So yes, there's definitely benefits, and also there's nuances as well.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And as you just said that about, you brought up the safety issue again, and I was thinking about, in my childhood, I not only did I not have a two-parent family, there was, I just had a mother and lots, lots and lots of siblings,
Hmm.
but I didn't have any male role model in our life. And if I did meet one, um, I know that my need or desire for a father was so great that I was completely vulnerable.
Yeah.
I mean, we got, abuse because there was, and they always say, if you're going to abuse a child, pick a fatherless child, a little girl in particular, because number one, they are so needy for male attention that you don't have to work so hard to lure them away with promises of candies and kittens.
Right.
And secondly, there is nobody to protect that child. If it is discovered that you have been abusing that child, there's
Mm.
no, big strong man that's going to come and beat the hell out of you for having messed with their child. So there was this real sense of lack and loss and need, but it was coupled with knowing that my need was very dangerous.
Yeah.
It was very dangerous. And I remember even one particular time when we got, some men came to our house, and thank God that I had locked the little trailer that I was staying in with my sister, but I was only about 5 years old, and these men came in the middle of the night, and they were rocking the trailer I was living in and trying to pull the door off. And when in the morning, I mean, I was like, my sister had a pillow over my head to stop me from screaming. But the next morning, we could see where they had torn the outer layers of little caravan
Yeah.
off the door. And I just remember thinking that if we'd had a father, that they would never have done that. I mean, he would have come out and screamed or yelled or whatever. But so there was definitely But besides the actual physical danger that I felt in as a child, um, the message I got, which was the most painful message, was you are not worth loving. Because
Mm.
my father lived down the road and would see me and pass me in the street and not acknowledge me. So for me, it was compounded by that you're not even worth acknowledging, you're not even worth saying hello to, or anything, protecting, loving, acknowledging, all of those things. So I think sometimes men feel that they're not important. I don't. I think there's a possibly the thought that went through my father's head was, I'm not important. I'm not necessary to my children's life, which is incredibly sad. So I really do hope that if any fathers listen to this, they really, really understand that their role is critical for the mental health and a child growing into a healthy adult. Because I certainly think there was a time there where um, we can do it all. We can, and when we can. And I'm not against raising a child in a single home. Again, as I said, if you have a strong support system, you have men that you can trust, brothers, uncles, fathers, somebody that can step in and provide what a woman maybe. I mean, not say a woman can't provide it, but just say that it adds to what the mother is providing.
There's a spectrum and availability, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because again, in my own journey growing up, both my grandfathers had passed away before I remember. One passed away when I think I was 5 years old. The other one passed away before I was born, or divorced even. I don't really remember. So my father was pretty much the only. There were a couple of uncles, but close to the physical proximity to my family, my dad was the only male role model I had. And one of those things, to speak to what you said earlier, I want to underscore as well, is that there were so many things that I realized growing up, I was vying for my dad's approval. There
Mm,
was this thing inside of me because being firstborn as well, and being the eldest son, there was this desire to get his approval because that would make my life okay. And even to when my book got published, 10, 11 years ago, I'd forgotten, so he nagged me. It's like, send him a copy of my book. It's like he wants to see my book that I'd written.
mhm.
Even when I asked him later on after he read it, because he didn't get back to me afterwards, he said, "Not bad." And
Yeah.
that's high praise from him. But the quality of communication of value that I got from my father was kind of that level. It was just like mediocre because he wasn't one to go, "You did amazing. You were great. You were fabulous."
Yeah.
Now, probably a good thing he didn't in some ways because it kept me somewhat humble. But
Yeah.
at the same time, there's parts of my life where I look back and go, if I'd had that, it would have changed things.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about actually goes beyond just, the father figure. I think,
Hmm.
it is parental. I think if our parents don't sort of um, acknowledge it, I mean, that's a huge endeavor, a huge thing to sort of achieve is to write and publish a book. And
Yeah.
I've appeared in a few different books. I've written passages and chapters in a few books of collaborative books, and my family didn't even read mine, so they couldn't even say, "Oh, good job." Um, but but I think we're talking about there is that it is hard when a parent is not intentionally withholding. I think it comes from they don't even value themselves. They don't understand how important their input and their attention and their love and care and expressing that love and care is.
Well, that's the thing I mentioned earlier about, my father learned from his father, and the sort of generational thing is that, you and I are fairly unique in some ways in the sense that we didn't just duplicate what our parents had taught us. We did our own internal journey. We found lessons and ways to grow and learn. There's a lot of people who watch our show get that as well, or listen to our podcast. So the thing is, I look back and realize that my dad, this is the thing that was harder to do before, but easier now. To look back at my father and see he did the best he could with what he knew how because of what he learned from his own parents, and didn't have any model or any expression to go and do something different. And also because he fought, he was drafted at the end of the Second World War. He spent time in the military, and so when he came out, he had that weight on his shoulders as well.
Hmm.
So definitely see the way he did things was perhaps to the best of his own ability at that time. And if I was in the same situation, maybe I would have done the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you just brought up the World War II because I was going to say that exactly that our parents were of that generation that were either right maybe they weren't old enough to have served in the war, but they were, teenagers, and
Yep.
they definitely, in the UK, as we know, it's a very different experience when war is being fought on your own land than
Oh
it
yeah.
is, I mean, I'm not belittling what the American service men did and their families here that suffered and things like that, but when the bombs are going off all around you and you don't know if you're going to make it, it can very much affect your emotional, psychological health,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
in protecting and shutting down a little bit emotionally. So yeah, and I also want to go back to, we've said how important, they just so many studies. Children do better in school. They do better, um, just on every level. There's less substance abuse when there's a father figure in a child's life. Um, they, as I said, they're academics. They much higher academic achievement when they have a father in their life. They're self-regulating, their emotional regulation. And I'm talking about a healthy father now. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about an abusive father or an absent father. I'm just talking about a healthy father that ticks most of the boxes we've talked about, but by
Mhm.
providing security and a good role model and things like that. But also economically, um, having when you have a single parent as a mother that's having to work, do all the work, she's not going to be fully present to take care of the children. So when you have a father that, and that's one thing about my ex-husband was, as much as we may have had difficulties and things, he was an excellent provider, and it allowed me during that time to be a stay-at-home mother. I mean, I was a painter, and I did a lot of other things. I taught Pilates, I did different things, but it wasn't, I didn't have to. Those were things that I enjoyed doing, and I was able to do them as well as being a stay-at-home mother. So that privilege is given when there's a father around.
Yeah.
And what's the other thing I was going to say? Oh yes, when you don't have a father around, and just again, especially for young girls, I can only talk for myself, but um, we are more promiscuous. We just are. We seek that male attention, and
Indeed.
what pubescent young woman doesn't realize, oh, hang on a minute, sex gets me lots of attention, or being sexual, or somebody will come on to you and you think, oh, that's how I notice, that's how I'm validated.
Yeah.
So risk of teenage pregnancy goes up really high, risk of rape goes up. I mean, there's all these things that children are exposed to if there is, an absent father or an abusive father.
Absolutely. And as we said before on the show, we do tend to learn at the feet of our parents because they're the ones that teach us what love is about and how it's expressed in relationship. Without any, there's no blackboard or PowerPoint. We just watch what they do and go, that must be the way it is, and we just imprint it on our own consciousness because that's the way young minds are when we're very young. So as an adult, if we don't take a moment to look back at ourselves and see how we compare against our parents and what they were doing, we tend to repeat the same patterns, the same ways of being, the same mindset and functionality in relationship without realizing it that our parents did. So this conversation about parents, regardless of what the father was like, we tend to repeat or copy or even make things up if we didn't have one of
Yeah.
how it would be. And we look for that in our partners if we're a woman or act that way if we're the man.
Yeah. Oh no,
Yes. Look at
absolutely. I told myself a story that my life would have been better if my father had been in it. And it was only when I met my half siblings and really connected with them and really talked to them to find out that maybe I had dodged a bullet.
it. Yeah, there you go.
There wasn't this, you know, fictitious prince character that I had created. I often say to my clients, because I know sometimes when you go through a divorce, especially if there's been some really, really painful situations happening, and there is that tendency to not want to see the father again and to have limited access. And I'm always like, oh, just please let the child have a relationship with the father. Let your child develop their own relationship with him. You don't have to. You can co-parent in a respectful manner, but it is so important. Don't move to it. I mean, it would be easier for you to move to another state or something like that, or far away, and not have to sort of face your ex if there was a particularly painful thing. But it is so you're setting yourself up for some really difficult times with that child if you do that.
Yeah,
Even if in your mind the father is not the best person in the world, let your child know who their father is rather than them make up a story and a fantasy of who they were and not be based in reality.
absolutely. Yeah, that's the biggest gift you give yourself in a sense. I was just looking back, also recognizing how, because we talk about this with such awareness now because we've been through a lot of journey to understand this. But for me, I remember, I think probably the first second time I was in a seminar, like a mind an awareness type training, and looking back now, I noticed how much of my behavior was governed, or should say, emulating what my father was like.
Mm,
Because one word was it, they were doing feedback at one of the exercises, and a word that came up a lot when they were describing me was aloof.
mm,
And it's so interesting looking back now because I was in an event last night where I was just one of the people being interviewed. And I remember I was just totally relaxed and amenable, and I actually flushed during one of the conversations because I was just feeling joyful. And I just had a point of fact of comparing then to now. And yes, that was a 30-year span.
mhm.
Noticing what my default was back then to what my default is now because of what I've chosen to do. And so anybody who's watching this or listening who feels like they don't know what to do, there's always going to be a way through this to become more whole and to really own who you want to be.
Yeah.
So no, it's not you're not. It's not like a life sentence. You're fated to deal with this the way it is because you have no choice. There
Well,
is choice.
yeah, no, exactly. Like we're talking about. I mean, my God, I could have, grown up and decided that, given how my father behaved, that all men are bastards, and I'm never going to, trust a
Yeah.
man, and I'm never going to do this and that, and it impacted me definitely. I know it did it in the sense that some of the things I've already mentioned, but it also I know impacted me because my father was a cheater,
Hmm.
obviously cheated with my mother. Um, my mother was his mistress, and I think there were quite a few others apparently. But I I know it affected me in the sense of I always thought if I marry somebody, they cheat on you. I'd rather not get married. Now I'll
Right.
fall in love with you and I'll be in a relationship with you. But if I marry you, it means that you're going to cheat on me. So it was just a very sort of imprinted thing that I had to I say I had to. I did get married once. Maybe I've regressed because I'm quite happily unmarried right now. I'm in a beautiful, loving relationship, but I don't feel the need to get married. So I definitely, maybe there's some remnants of that there. Not that I think nobody would ever cheat. I just am not
No.
bothered about getting married. But what I also wanted to say is, and I know I've mentioned this before, but my brother grew up without a father too, obviously, and the lack of a father figure in his life, I think it's certainly had effects, on his self esteem and his confidence and things like that. But the one thing that and he did struggle and with many things different from what the girls struggled from, for sure. But what I did see with my brother is he always said that my father's behavior taught him how to be a father, and he really, really is. He's an excellent father.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, his wife passed away, but he was an incredible husband as well. So, sometimes, I mean, what I'm trying to say is it's not always the chip off the old block that they model certain behavior, but we all have free will and we can all look at somebody's behavior and say, I'm not going to repeat that. I'm not going to do that. I know the effects as a child of what that had on me. How would I ever consciously do that to a child of mine?
Right.
And this, in the same way, I feel very much the same with my mother. There was certain, I mean, my mother did an amazing job raising 7 children without a father, but I also realized that there are certain ways in which she parented that I don't take it as, oh, that's the way to parent by any means. I certainly can feel what it felt like to be shamed as a child. She was great at shaming. That was her. I mean, you've got to control 7 children, and what's the easiest way to control? Shame. So I got a heavy dose of shame. So I never shame my children. I just that is my biggest thing. Is like it's such an awful feeling to carry, and to not and to get over. Quite honestly, it's like having a shadow. It's like having this sort of thing next to you. The shame that just goes everywhere with you. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
obviously I'm a lot better, and I do talks on shame and toxic shame and how to overcome it. But it's one of the worst things a parent can do to a child is to shame them.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, I've shared this before in previous episodes about the bullying I went through in high school. Some of that was because looking back now, again, the wisdom of hindsight, it's such a gift to look back at things in hindsight, 2020, was I know very clearly that at least two of the boys that were used to make my life miserable, I strongly suspect, and don't have proof of this, but I strongly suspect they had miserable lives too from their own families. They may have had abusive fathers or whatever it was, that they basically did on me and other kids because they had to express their own rage and fury of being pushed around to push somebody else around so they could feel better.
Oh, absolutely.
So, so just to say that in terms of out in the world, if you have people like your bosses or people you're around socially or even politically, there are people out there who basically are behaving a certain way because of the way their fathers influenced them as well.
Mhm.
So that maybe just to give you a chance to pause before you react to somebody's way of being and go, hang on a second, maybe that isn't about me after all.
Yeah.
It isn't usually anyway.
No, exactly. I mean, yeah, I mean, there have books been written about, Trump for one. Mary Trump wrote the book.
Hmm.
What was it? What's the title of the book? Something about never enough. Not good enough or never enough. And it's that from all accounts, his father was an incredibly demanding man,
Yeah.
and Trump grew up feeling, that he had to live up to him. So anyway, enough about
Yes.
politics.
Yes. Yes.
There are
Yeah.
many, many, like I just finished reading the Elon Musk book. Again, Elon Musk's father was apparently, they don't have a relationship. Both he and his brother don't have a relationship with him. I read the Agassi book, and that was, again, you can really see how so many fathers um, didn't didn't live the life they wanted for themselves. So they basically took their child and want to vicariously live through them. They want their children to excel at something, to be the best tennis player in the world because you know um, um, his father was an excellent tennis player. Same thing with the oh my gosh, was it Lord Richard or something? The film about Vanessa and
Oh, yeah. 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 Lord Richard. King
yeah,
Richard. Excuse me. King Richard.
exactly the same thing. Excellent tennis player, but he didn't. So he wanted his daughters to be world champions, and that was. And I think the film portrayed him as a loving father too, or but strict for sure. But yes, sometimes I think, and we have to really be careful. I think as a parent that we really do see our children. I love the prophet where it talks about our children come through us, they're not ours, that
Right.
we're just the bow and they're the arrow, and we shoot them off into the universe and they're to become their own people. And but if we can provide that love and security in that beautiful place for them, as they're growing up, so they can go off into the world feeling secure, feeling lovable, feeling confident, feeling that they're worthy. I mean, those are incredible gifts that we can give our children.
Absolutely. That's the best thing we do for our future generations on the planet as well, is how we can be the best at what we can be for our children, for those children around us, even if we're not a parent ourselves.
Yeah. And for those that don't have children, there are wonderful opportunities. There are children, they really are. There are children in foster care. There are children that desperately need a parental figure, a good role model, a male role model to just be there for them. So even if you haven't had children of your own, it doesn't mean that you can't not be this incredible role model for a male role model for a child out there.
Yeah, there's boys clubs, girls clubs.
Mhm.
There's a friend of mine. She's been a mentor to girls in the girls club, and just she's so grateful because what it's done for herself, not just for the kids, but what she's got out of it. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
There you
thank you, everybody. I think we've come to the end of today's show.
go. Quite a conversation.
Yes, really. All right. Well, have a wonderful week, everybody, and we will see you back here next week for another great chat. Thanks,
Bye.
Gary.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.